and I was up in Anchorage for we were covering Iditarod with one of the stores up there, and that's the time to go because it was negative 31, 33,
Yeah, no.
um, and uh, uh, that's it's something to experience.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm really hoping it's not quite that cold when I actually go. I've got a friend though who was the first photographer that got a grant to photograph Denali and stay up there.
Right?
So that was super cool. Look her up, Camille Seaman. I think you can actually see a lot of that trip online if you just Google Camille Seaman Denali. You'll get to see, I think there were a number of news reports done about it. It was very cool.
Nice.
Oh,
Oh, that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna check that out.
all
I was
right.
listening to I don't know if anyone in here listens to the Moth at all. The Moth is the kind of the top of the line live storytelling around the world, and there was a story about the first woman to complete the full Canadian coast to coast via dog sled, and it was incredible. Her story was amazing, talking about bears and wolves and all of the above that could eat me in one bite. So it was impressive.
That's awesome.
Go sled dogs.
Oh, and looks like we got somebody visiting from Annapolis. Hi, Annapolis. It's good. The Blue Angels. Oh, yes. We are very familiar with those air shows. Anybody else want to throw into the chat where it is you're joining us from? We always like to know, especially since today we're talking about traveling. And I'll go ahead and start just with saying hi. I'm Jen. I am from Looking Glass Photo. In case you haven't met me before, many of you may have seen me in this space once or twice. But I'm really, really excited to have you guys with us, to have Tamara on here again, and Erica, we love you so much. Erica's travel teachings are absolutely some of the best classes because Erica, I'm going to go ahead and start this by giving you props. Erica is one of the best photographers to really shoot with empathy and understand her subject and approach it really well so that when we're experiencing other cultures or strangers on the street or whatever it is, she is so good at getting the shot and at the same time making friends everywhere she goes, not offending people at all, and taking the time to learn from those experiences. And I think we can all take a lot from that. So that's one of the biggest opportunities of travel, right? Is to get to experience a culture that isn't our own, get outside of our bubble, learn something new, and really just engage with the world in a way that we get to finally see it maybe through somebody else's eyes. So I'm going to shut up now and continue letting people in. Oh, except for the one reminder, if everybody could go ahead and keep your video and your audio muted just during the presentation, so that we make sure we have plenty of bandwidth for Erica's presentation today. Thank you guys all for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just jump in quick too and say, again, thank you, Jen, for having us. We really love doing these classes with you guys. Will be wonderful once we can do them in person again. We're getting so close, it seems. But for the time being, we'll just keep at it on the virtual. And I couldn't, second everything that you said about Erica and her presentations. They're always, you can rely on Erica's presentations to be incredibly inspiring. And then, of course, we're all here because we have some interest in photography, and her photography is incredible. I've actually recently been talking to Erica about buying one of her prints, actually, maybe even for my house of the art museum in my hometown. So you guys can follow her. I'm sure she'll put her social media information up there. And it's my job, of course, as the rep for the territory, to jump in here and just remind everybody, as I see there's the Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, so well represented in our attendees here today. Remind you all that Looking Glass is one of our very cherished partners and dealers there in the Northern California area. Please see them for all of your photographic needs, and particularly with the Tamron. We have a good handful of lenses we've got rebates on right now. So you can check the Tamron website for that, or you can just go check in with Looking Glass. You can call, you can go in the store. Please see them for any and all of your photographic needs. And so then now I will shut up and let Erica get started at inspiring us. But just one last quick reminder and request that we get everybody to not only mute your mics, but to also turn off your video, like Jen says, so that it kind of helps with bandwidth. So we can actually see Erica's presentation and we don't run into any issues there. So without further ado, Miss Robinson, take it away. Oh, wait.
Actually, there's one. I just want to make sure we address Kaylee's question here. Erica, Kaylee was asking what the podcast was with the Traveler Across Canada.
Oh, it's called The Moth. The Moth, like the little mini butterfly, the moth. It's a storytelling podcast, and they will have anything and everything to inspire you, make you cry, make you laugh. Jen, I don't know if I'm sure you know of The Moth. Yes. No. Oh my God. I'm going to send it to you after this class. It is right up your alley.
I'm going to need a list of podcasts because
okay.
I don't actually listen to any. So, send me all the suggestions, please.
Oh, girl, you just opened Pandora's box. I've got a load of them. But yes, The Moth is the one that I was talking about earlier. And I want to say it was a story from this past like December, November time. It was a little while back. So you might have to dig to find that specific story. But anyway, all right. Well, that was quite possibly the nicest intro I've ever had. So thank you so much. Thank you to your amazing store. Thank you to Looking Glass for having me. Thanks to Ben for being here with me. He's going to be popping in there answering a bunch of questions while we're chatting. And thank you guys. Thank you guys for popping in online and spending an hour or so with me. I know that none of us planned on being in webinars as long as we have. We certainly, wanted to be in person by now, but you guys still being with me online means that you are still safe, happy, and healthy, and that I do get to see you in the future in person in your local store. So that being said, I'm super grateful for all of you. Today, we are going to talk about travel photography because it's like one of my favorite things to talk about. So we're gonna dive right in. And if you've been in presentations with me before, you've probably heard me say this a bazillion times, but I'm going to repeat it because it's just as important. I hope that if you get anything from today's presentation, even if it is just one thing, I truly hope that you are inspired. That you are inspired to try something new, that you're inspired to think outside of the box with your photography, that you're inspired to pop over to Looking Glass and check out some new gear or pick up that new bag that you've been trying to figure out or whatnot, something that is going to help move you forward with your passions in photography. So I do hope that you're inspired. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into that little chat box down there. If Ben and Jen can get to them, if they are relevant at that point, they will definitely cut me off and interrupt. And if not, they will definitely get to them, or we'll get to them towards the end. So I promise we will get to you. But again, thank you so much for being here. We are going to start with some questions. So when we put together this new genre, when we put together this new set of presentations, we were asked to approach it sort of like a guide, like a guidebook. So if I were to approach travel photography, how do I do that, right? So when I approach any photo shoot or any travel or really anything, I ask myself a whole bunch of questions. So that's what I did with this. So we're going to approach it somewhat like this. So starting with why we travel. I'm going to give you some lists of reasons why I enjoy travel, and you're welcome to jump into the chat box today because this is our little community. So if you have reasons why you travel or places that you're going, things that inspire you, please feel free to drop them in there. Number two, we're going to jump into research. Have I researched my location? Research, I think, is like 90% of the battle because the more we know about the person, place, or thing that we are photographing, the better our stories are going to come across, the better we are going to be understood by our viewer. And just the more we're going to know, right? And we always want to be learning. So I think research is super important. We're going to talk about how we're getting there and some logistics, because the logistics of travel really make a big difference, especially on a photo trip. We don't want to have to be worried about all the extra stuff going on. We don't want to have to worry about showing up in a place and booking a hotel last minute and having everything be overbooked. While we have to be flexible with our travels, we want to try and plan before we get there. So I'll give you some tips on how I plan. We're going to talk about packing and what we bring on these types of trips. We're going to talk about proper camera settings, and we're going to talk about creating unique compositions. Now, very last on this list here, it's not a question, of course, but this is your friendly reminder to please remember to enjoy the moments. Enjoy your photography, enjoy your travels, look outside of the viewfinder every once in a while, because that comes across in your photos as well. If you're enjoying your trip or if you're soaking in some new information, that stuff comes across in your images. So definitely remember to enjoy the moments. Photography is still an art, and we still want to be letting all of our creative juices flow. So enjoy them all. So first, we're going to get into number one here, why we travel. So if you guys have any reasons as to why you travel or special places you're going, please feel free to pop them into the chat box. Like I said, this is our little community. So maybe if someone has never heard of this place, or if someone has, trying to get their reasons to why they should go somewhere, maybe your comment is going to help them along, right? So reasons why I travel, first and foremost, is to explore. I love to explore. For me, it's kind of the mission and the process, and wanting to see the place or meet the person firsthand, not necessarily seeing it in a book or living it through somebody else. I kind of want to see it on my own. So I love the exploration phase and the exploration process. And what that allows me to do is then to share, to grow as a person, and to connect. And that's connect with anything. That's connect with other people. That's connect with a specific place or a thing or an animal. There are so many connections out there to be made, right? So my travel kind of starts with the exploration process and moves towards sharing, growing, and communicating. Now, as travel photographers, we have to remember that we approach all sorts of different subjects on our travels. We meet people, so we're doing a lot of environmental portraits. We come across wildlife, right? So maybe we are taking longer lenses because we come across some wildlife that is at a distance, or we're birding, or like in this case, I needed my macro to get up close to something very tiny, right? We also approach all of our cityscapes and our landscapes, right? As travel photographers, we have kind of all of these topics that we're approaching, and sometimes it's narrowing that, depending on the trip, right? Sometimes it's about narrowing that down so that we know how we are going to approach a space, or sometimes it's just kind of letting it flow, right? And letting that trip happen as it comes to us, right? And we get to choose that. We are the traveler, we are the photographer, we are the artist. So we kind of get to choose how that flows, right? So number two, research. Have I done my research properly? Or do I need a guide for this space? So if I am, well, I always want to be researching, right? So when I'm researching a space, have I figured out if it is a landscape or a specific wildlife that I'm photographing? Have I figured out the season that I need to be there? So seasons are going to be really particular, because if I'm trying to photograph foliage, I can't show up in the summer, right? Or if I'm trying to photograph a specific bird migration that takes place in June and I get there in July because I didn't research properly, I have then kind of completely lost the ability to do that photo shoot because I didn't research properly. If it is about a person that I'm photographing, have I been a good listener? Have I paid attention to what they are trying to say so that I can get that story across? And then, is there a history of this space? I can research through magazines and blogs and social media, and we'll talk about the research, how to do it in just a second. But I want to make sure that I'm thinking about all of these pieces of the research. And if I need a guide or a fixer for this location, so there are a lot of places that it is a lot easier to dive deeper into the location if I am with someone that understands the location better. So if I don't speak the language, or if I need help with currency, or if I need help with transportation, having a fixer or a guide, somebody that's going to be there as my middleman, my middle person, to help me navigate that might be a really good idea. And again, that depends on the travel, but I hope these are tips that are helpful. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you into Iceland with me for a minute because I've been a few times, and I figured this way we can kind of approach it together as far as how we would start researching for this travel, right? So if we are all headed off to Iceland together, I'm going to start with literally with a map. I'm going to start thinking about what my photo goals are of this place. And I make a list. So I make an A list and a B list. I make that A list of all the places that are my absolute have to get to places. The things that I absolutely have to photograph or are just really, really important for whatever this travel is, right? So I'll make my list: Reykjavik, Gullfoss, Markarfell, Basalt Stacks, places that are my A-list spots to go see. Then I make my B list, the places that I definitely want to try and get to and would be a perk to see or to eat at if it's a restaurant, or to learn something from if it's a museum. I make that B list where if I don't get to these places, it's okay. I'm not going to be super heartbroken, but I would really like to try to, right? Now, in doing that, I have to think about how I'm going to kind of piece all of this together. So I start thinking about what pieces can help me with the ideas and what pieces can help me with the planning, because those are going to be two separate aspects, right? So what I figured I would do is put up a list here of some apps and websites, things that kind of help me along my travels. And there's a lot on here, so you're welcome to take a screenshot or write a few of them down, take a picture with your phone, whatever you need. But when I am looking for ideas and inspiration, I'm going to pop onto things like, Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, of course, you can hashtag anything in the world and all sorts of images are going to come up to inspire you about this person, place, or thing. There's also things like Atlas Obscura, which kind of is on the hunt for different within an area, the off the beaten path type of stuff. Then you have things like TripAdvisor, which will help you with when other people rate things so that you can see if they were good or bad. I got different reviews, read a little bit more on them. If you like to hike, I hop onto this website called The Hiking Guy, who has both a website, Instagram, and Facebook. And he really just kind of gives out all the details of his trip, of his hike, so I can see what it was like. And then Lonely Planet has an app called Trips, where people will post images from their trips and just write their story of the place, right? So those are always really helpful. And then in the planning process, I'll use things like Sky Guide and Photo Pills and Aurora if this is a trip where I really want to photograph the night sky. There's also Dark Site Finder, which is really helpful. So if I'm in a location where I'm not exactly sure if there's a local place near me that is more of a dark sky area, I can check it out there. TripIt. TripIt is an amazing organizational tool. So if you are someone like me who pre-COVID was traveling 3 or 4 times a week, I was on the road like 90% of my life. I could email all of my receipts. So my hotel, my car, my flight, I could email all of those receipts to this app, and it would organize them for me. So it would put them listed per trip so that I didn't have to go into like 4 different apps to pull up all of that information. It was all there, neatly organized. There's a couple others down here for campers and hikers. If you like to hike, All Trails is epic. Make sure that you use the downloadable version so that you can actually download the trail maps. Really helpful for not getting lost, of course. Definitely safe. The Dirt, if you're looking for campsites or places to park your RV, or Bureau of Land Management, BLM land, you can definitely find that on the Dirt. And then Translate, Google Translate. So if you are in a location where you don't speak the language, it's really helpful to be able to connect with people so that you can show that you are trying to be in their place, in their space, with their language. We can't, as Americans, expect to show up everywhere and have everybody speak English. Yes, it is a widely spoken language, but not everyone speaks that language. And when I go back and forth to Cuba every year, I can't expect for everyone to speak English. I have to know that I have to try with my Spanish, right? So Google Translate is a really helpful app for that. I mean, you can even learn before you get there, right? So Rosetta Stone, or there's another one I was using for a while, and I'm blanking on the name. It'll come to me. But anyway, we just want to try and have all the research we can as best we can. So another little research tip that might sound really silly, but I think gets overlooked quite a bit, is the use of satellite view on Google Maps. So it might sound really silly. You've probably used it a whole bunch of times, but I do think it gets overlooked. There are a lot of places that are easier to find and easier to pinpoint for navigation purposes if I'm looking at that from a bird's eye view. If I just walk up to this specific beach in Iceland, which I'm so sorry I cannot say the name, I've tried a bazillion times, but if I just walk up to this specific beach and I'm looking for a very specific rock or pattern or formation in this space, it's hard for me at my 5-foot height level to walk up and find it, right? So using the satellite view in Google Maps will help me kind of hover over this space, find the exact pinpointed location, and then be able to get to it a lot easier, right? So again, it might sound really silly. Maybe you've used it a whole bunch of times already, but I think it is a really useful thing to use. So all in all of those pieces, while that's kind of a lot of information and seems like we're really overthinking it, it's going to help us on our travels figure out when I need to be there, how I'm going to get there, if there are deeper stories within this space that I can share. All of that research is going to help you create better images. We also have to think about our logistics, right? So that was kind of all the photo research part of things, right? But the logistics in the actual travel are just as important. So how am I getting there and where am I staying? If I am staying in a hotel, that's going to be a wildly different trip than if I'm staying at a hostel or a campground, or if I'm staying in an Airbnb. There are different check-in regulations, there are different checkout hours, there are different ways that you're going to store your equipment and different safety measures you have to take, right? So those are things to take into consideration. If I have to think about if I am traveling by car, by bus, by train, if I am stopping at grocery stores versus restaurants. All those things are going to change the logistic of the actual trip, right? Because if I am driving, I get to determine a little bit more of the process. I get to determine not only the route, but the departure and the arrival time. That stuff is all up to me, right? Now I have to plan it properly, because if I don't, I'm going to end up all over the place. So I have to make sure that I do plan it, but I have a little bit more wiggle room. I also then have to figure out the places to stay along the way, right? So I have to figure out, maybe I'm just car camping. Maybe I'm just finding a local spot and car camping, and I don't need to worry about an extra hotel, right? But if not, I need to figure out the hotels and the Airbnbs and the stuff along the way. I need to figure out the food. So if this is a, 14-hour road trip, I don't want to spend any extra time in the car than I have to. So if I stop to eat at a restaurant for every single meal, that's going to take another extra hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And you'll notice, even when you stop to use the restroom, somehow that tacks on another half hour to your trip every single time. Don't know how, but sometimes time flies when you just go into that gas station restroom. You come out a half hour later, my God, you already have another half hour tacked onto your trip, right? So I have to think about the food. This also, though, if I am driving, allows me to possibly take more items versus if I am flying. If I'm flying, I have a little bit less control, right? So the plane is determining my departure and my arrival. I have to figure out the logistics around that. So I have to make sure that I have an airport pickup and drop off. Is somebody picking me up when I get to my destination? If I'm driving to the airport, am I leaving my car there? Am I taking a Lyft there or an Uber? How much time do I have to allot for that? Do I have the proper bags for packing? And have I thought about the weight restrictions that come along with that? So I have to think about, if I am in Hawaii and I am taking a tiny little puddle jumper plane from one island to the next, there are weight restrictions on my carry-on luggage, as well as my my checked luggage, as well as my carry-on luggage, right? They need to weigh out everything for fuel measurements and things like that. So weight restrictions are definitely something to think about. Do I have all of my travel documents? Have I not only planned my passport, but do I need a visa for this space? And sometimes I need my visa a year in advance. Sometimes I just need it a week in advance. I have to think about those parts. Again, have I packed the proper food? If you're really picky about what you eat, like I am, a lot of times I pack my food to fly instead of spending, a bazillion dollars at an airport for a water bottle that costs like $14, right? I want to make sure that I'm maybe bringing my reusable water bottle so I can fill it at the airport. And currency and gear insurance. So this is, of course, all going to be dependent on the location, but I have to think about, am I taking out currency in the US before I get to this location? Am I bringing debit cards? So I'm avoiding some fees, but taking a little bit of a risk, possibly with taking out money at an ATM someplace else. So we have to think about things like that. And gear insurance, making sure that my camera gear when I'm traveling is covered. Have I covered it with not only just regular travel insurance, but loss and theft? So it's one thing if I drop a lens in the sand, in the water, right here in the ice, and I wreck it, but it's another thing to completely lose it or have it stolen, right? So we need to think about that with our insurance. All right, so let's dive into the equipment list and what we're going to bring with us on our travels. So if anyone has traveled and been on workshops with me, you know that I'm very picky with my camera bags. So we're going to talk about camera bags first. We are going to talk about, of course, what camera lenses to bring, because that's kind of why we're here, right? We want to talk about some gear. We're going to talk about some accessories and what we might need for specific travels. And another friendly reminder here to please, please bring plenty of media. Now, travel could just mean that you are literally going an hour away to a beach, right? Travel doesn't have to mean anything extravagant, but when we go just an hour away, sometimes we overthink it and we don't bring a bunch of stuff, right? And while you don't have to bring a bunch of stuff, if you bring only one memory card, and yes, I know memory cards can fit like a bazillion images at this point, but if you bring one 64 gig card and that card goes defective, or you somehow forgot to format it and you need those images, you haven't actually saved them yet, right? you're now going to be kind of SOL. You can't photograph that day, right? You're going to be sorely disappointed. So just a friendly reminder to please bring plenty of media, and please bring either extra batteries or chargers with you, especially if you are going to a cold location. You want to make sure that those batteries stay nice and close to you, to your body, inside your jacket pocket, so that they stay warm. The warmer they are, the longer they are going to last for your photo shoot. Okay. So back to the top of that list there, camera bags. I am very picky with camera bags. I'm literally looking at a shelf of all my camera equipment right now, where I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different camera bags. I think that's all I have is that shelf. Yeah, 9 different camera bags, right? There is not one perfect bag for every travel, right? But I thought I would offer some tips that might help you guys out. And this is just a personal preference. So there are loads of camera bag manufacturers out there, but I have developed a little bit of an equation in my head. So if I am going to a photo shoot where I am taking 3 or more lenses, I am taking a backpack. If I am taking less than 3 lenses and just 1 camera body, I'll take a shoulder bag, right? What I was finding was that I was traveling with my shoulder bags and I was packing them chock full of stuff, and I would end up like kind of hunched over at the end of the day. I would have this like total slant in my body, and my shoulders weren't happy, my back wasn't happy. So I decided that either 3 or more lenses or 2 or more camera bodies, I am taking a backpack. Now, like I said, there are so many bag manufacturers out there. Think Tank is amazing. I have a whole bunch of their bags. Tenba, their bags. Lowepro has been in the game forever, so they make some great bags. This is a bag that I just kind of built for myself because it was very comfortable for a small female. And then I just used camera bag inserts. Some of them are made by f-stop, some of them are made by Tenba. Think Tank makes some as well. And these are little modular inserts that I can slide into this bag and kind of outfit it to whatever I'm taking with me on that particular travel, right? So my suggestion, regardless of what brand you're going with, make sure you pop into your camera store and physically try them on, make sure that they are comfortable, and make sure that they are efficient for you. Everybody has a different process, so I cannot tell you one specific bag, whether it's a backpack or shoulder bag, that is going to 100% work for everything. But I definitely recommend trying them on, feeling them out, and taking them for a little mini trip before you actually take your big trip, right? You want to make sure that all the pieces kind of work and that you kind of have muscle memory for where you put stuff when you go on that big trip, so that you don't have to be digging around for all sorts of things, right? Just helps your brain be a little bit more organized. All right, so let's talk about some camera and lenses, because of course we're here to photograph, right? So when I'm traveling, I have to determine first, what camera am I bringing? Am I taking my full frame gear? Am I taking my crop frame gear? Am I taking my mirrorless gear? Or am I taking 2 systems, right? And this again, all depends on the travel. There are some places that that I've gone that I really need to take as little equipment as possible. So maybe I'm just taking my mirrorless system, or even 2 mirrorless systems that are small and I have smaller lenses to work with, just easier to travel with. But maybe it's a space where I'm taking my full frame and my crop frame for 2 different reasons, or my full frame and my mirrorless for 2 different reasons. There's a whole bunch of ways you can go about this, and this is really up to you. There's absolutely no right or wrong, and don't let anybody tell you that there is a wrong way to do it 100%, right? Because this is, again, what works for you, okay? So when it comes to lenses, again, this is a total personal preference. This is how you photograph as an artist, how you see the world. I personally love prime lenses. I love having to be forced into that specific guideline where I have to do the moving. I have to maneuver around to figure out what is going to go in those borders of my frame, right? Personally, my 35 1.4 is my absolute favorite. It's actually what I'm using right now to video me. Hands down, one of my favorite lenses. It is wildly sharp. It is a 1.4, so it lets in a whole ton of light. It's also quite a small lens, right? It has a great minimum focusing distance. So when I am out working with people and doing some environmental portraits, I can really, again, control what's in the borders of my frame, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, something that might be really great to travel with is all-in-one lenses. All-in-one lenses are literally exactly how they sound. They are lenses that do a little bit of everything. They start at a wider angle. They give you all of those middle focal lengths. And of course, they give you that telephoto end so that you can get, like I said, a little bit of everything. You don't have to be switching out lenses. If you want to go on this trip and take it easy and take one lens and not 12, this is a great way to do it. So I put a little example up here using the 28 to 300 so that you could see this exact space. I was on the balcony of my hotel room looking out at this bridge, and with the 28 millimeter, as wide as this lens can go, you could see the image on the top right. And then I didn't physically move, because if I moved, I'm going off the balcony, right? I can't go very far. So I physically zoomed in to 300, and this is that very first street light that you see that was on the top right image, right? So you get a lot all in one lens. Now, if I'm not taking all-in-one lenses, sometimes I'm considering, okay, well, maybe I'm taking 2 or 3 lenses. And if I'm doing that, I first go for a prime, then I take a wide angle, and then I take a telephoto, right? So for my wide angle lenses, one of my favorites is the 15 to 30. The 15 to 30 is a super wide lens. It is 2.8, so it lets in a whole ton of light. It is wildly sharp. It's just an overall wonderful lens to photograph with. It also allows me to do a lot of that night sky photography that I love. So when I'm traveling, I love staying out late at night and watching the night sky. And the 15 to 30, because it is a 2.8 and super wide, lets in all of that light and allows me to see the full night sky. So it's a great lens for that. If you're looking for something a little bit lighter, there's a 17 to 35, which also starts at 2.8 and lets in a whole ton of light, but is a bit smaller than the 15 to 30. 15 to 30 is a little bit larger of a lens because it has this nice round element on the front, which does not make it fisheye. It's actually rectilinear on its edges, so it keeps it nice and straight, but it is physically larger, right? So if I'm looking for something smaller, I can go with that 17 to 35. Now, if you are a Sony shooter, Tamron has a full lineup of lenses that are native built for the Sony E-mount. The 28 to 75 is one of my favorites. It kind of fits in that element of with full frame bodies. When you get your 24 to 70, 24 to 70 is usually that first full frame lens that you go for, because it shows you something a little wider than what you naturally see and a little bit longer than what you naturally see. So it's a great walk around lens. And for Sony, the 28 to 75 is exactly that. It's a great walk around lens because it gives you a little bit more than what your natural eye sees and a little bit less than what your natural eye sees. So it gives you kind of a great range there for everyday purposes. We also cannot forget about our telephoto lenses. So when we're traveling, I know that we want to travel as light as possible. We can't forget about our telephotos and their place in our kit. Telephotos, of course, are going to be great for reaching that distance. So if I am trying to capture wildlife, bird migrations, whatever that may be, of course, our telephotos are great for that. But our telephotos are also great for compressing our landscapes. We kind of often forget that our landscapes don't necessarily just need to be photographed in wide angle. I don't need to see everything all the time. Compressing my landscapes can be a really useful tool, and that gets done with our telephoto lenses. This one actually is for Sony. You can see the little designation down on the bottom right there. This is the 70 to 180 DA3 RXD for Sony. All right, so let's talk about some extra stuff, some extra equipment that you're probably going to need on your travels. Filters. So back when we shot film, we had like 30 different filters. We had a yellow, we had a green, we had a red, we had every filter under the sun. We don't necessarily need all of those anymore. So the three that you are most likely to use are going to be first your UV haze filter. So a clear filter, something that is mostly there for protection, there so that if you do drop your lens, if you do scratch it up, you have scratched up the filter and not the actual lens. So it's a much cheaper style of repairing it. And I've had lots of people definitely say, well, they don't like to use filters because they don't want to degrade the quality of the lens, right? And yes, you can absolutely do that. If you buy a $10 piece of plastic and use that as your filter and put that on the front of your lens, yes, you are then compromising your images. So usually what I say is that regardless of what brand of filter you're looking for, just make sure that it is the quality, the same quality of glass that you purchased for your actual lens, right? You want to make sure that they are just as good a quality. The other two filters that you will probably need on your travels are a circular polarizer and a neutral density. Okay, so a circular polarizer does a couple of different things. Polarizer is two pieces of glass, and as you rotate that second piece of glass, you're going to get a little bit more saturation, you're going to get a bit more contrast, you're going to be able to pull out the kind of nice white puffy clouds and control your highlights and your lowlights. And people will say a lot, you know, well, they can do this later in post-process. And while you can do a lot in post-process, and definitely Photoshop has come a long way, but one, it will take you forever to try and do. And two, if you have to try and pull out highlights that you have blown out so that they're not there anymore, it's going to look really grainy and really fake when you try and do that in post-process later on. So it is much more efficient to do it with a polarizer and get the image done properly in the first place. So I have a little video here. I'm hoping that it will play as we're chatting. This is the circular polarizer, and as I'm physically turning this outside piece of glass, you will see the polarization happening. So it's not like a mystery. It's not something that you have to wait to see later on in the computer. You will actually see it happening as you turn and work with the glass. So next up is neutral density filters. Neutral density filters are a dark filter. They will take away anywhere from 2 to 10 stops of light, depending on what neutral density you actually get. So you can do singular neutral density filters, one that will take away 2 stops, one that will take away 4 stops, one that will take away 6 stops, and so on. Or you can get a variable neutral density. And a variable neutral density, like the polarizer, will be 2 pieces of glass. And as you rotate it, it will take away anywhere from 2 to 10 stops, all within that singular filter. Now, my recommendation, if you do the variables, is just to make sure that it's one that has a stopper on the ends so that you don't over-rotate that glass. As you over-rotate the glass, if it doesn't have a stopper, you're going to end up with this kind of nasty dark X right through the middle of your image. It's almost like it's confusing the glass, the filter. So we want to make sure that regardless of what brand you're working with, that it has a stopper on the ends and you don't over rotate that glass. So another piece of equipment that you are, or that I highly recommend, maybe it's not required, but I highly recommend, I personally think that it is a necessity, not an accessory, but a tripod. So I have a Gitzo Traveler. I love that tripod. I spent like $1,000 on this tripod, and I'm not telling you that you have to go out and spend $1,000 on your tripod. However, I bought this tripod 11 years ago, and it still comes with me on all my travels. It was an investment that I can now use for all of my travels. It is plenty light enough, but it's plenty strong enough to hold all of my equipment. It's easily packable. It's just a very useful tool. Now, there are a a lot of images that you simply cannot create without a tripod. I don't care if you've never had a cup of coffee in your life, you still cannot handhold for 30 seconds. If you're trying to shoot the Milky Way and you have to have your shutter open for anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds, you can't handhold for that long, I promise. Your tripod also is supported for composition. So you can say, all right, well, I'll put my camera on that rock over there. Or I will put my camera on the hood of my car and it will stay steady. Yes, you can absolutely do that, but you have just compromised your composition. If the thing you are trying to photograph is on the left and the rock is on the right, you now have no stable place, right? The lack of being able to control your composition, right? So I think a tripod is very important for your travels. All right, so let's talk about some camera settings. Now, while there's not one specific equation that I can give you that will allow you to create every image under the sun, there are definitely some things to consider that will help you in creating your images. So first, this means that we need to get out of our auto mode. So my coworker, Armando, calls it the green mode of death. We want to stay out of that green mode. We want to be in as much control of our images as possible. When we're staying in that green mode, we are allowing the camera to take full control, full creative properties, right? So if I am trying to create a more shallow depth of field, the camera doesn't necessarily know that. If I'm trying to slow down my shutter, the camera doesn't necessarily know that, right? I want to be in creative control. And in green mode, it's going through a whole bunch of algorithms to try and guess what's going on in your brain. And you are the only person that knows what's going on inside your brain, right? So we need to then either be in full manual control or think about aperture priority and shutter priority. So in aperture priority, you are in control of the aperture and the camera is in control of the shutter, which means it's always going to properly expose for you, but you are in control of how much light is coming in through your lens. You're also in control of your depth of field. So if I want a very nice shallow depth of field, I need to tell the camera and tell the lens that by using maybe aperture priority to help me with that. If I am trying to control speed, so in this case, if I am trying to show the water move through my frame, if I want to see it nice and smooth, I know that I need a slower shutter, right? This was shot at 1 second, but it was a fairly bright day out, right? Even though we had some kind of contrasting tones here, we had some dark tones and some light tones. But if I had just put this into auto mode, it may have likely shot this at a faster shutter speed. So if I had shot this at an 8,000th of a second or a 4,000th of a second, I would have frozen every little drop of water and it would have looked drastically different, right? In shutter priority, I'm in control of the shutter, the camera is in control of the aperture, so it's going to properly expose for me, but I get to be in control of the speed, okay? And then of course, full manual mode allows you to be in full creative control, allowing you to choose your aperture, your shutter, and your ISO, especially when you are in specific situations where you kind of need to trick the camera in a sense. So if I'm shooting the Aurora Borealis, for example, or if I'm shooting any sort of night sky, I need to be in full manual control because I need to determine how much light is coming in through each of those aspects to make sure that my sensor is seeing more or less light, right? So that's going to be what allows me to do so, being in manual mode so that I can control all things, my ISO, my shutter speed, and my aperture. Now, while we can create a technically perfect image, right? We can properly use our ISOs and our shutter speeds and our apertures, but if we don't have any oomph to our images, if we don't have anything exciting for our viewer to look at, why are they going to want to look at our images, right? We really need to make sure that composition is at the forefront of our images, because as cheesy as it sounds, I do think that composition is key. We have to think about things like where our focal point is within our frame. Am I using leading lines to help my viewer get there? What perspective am I trying to gain here? Am I framing a specific subject within my image? All of these things are kind of puzzle pieces to our photos, and we just have to put them all together properly, right? So first, we start with our focal point. What is my focal point? My focal point is the very first thing that my viewer sees when they see my image. So regardless of whether I'm showing them this on my phone, it's digital, on an iPad, on a computer, or whether I am showing this a physical print, your focal point is still the first spot that your viewer's eye is going to go to. And how I get to that focal point is through leading lines. So leading lines are these physical lines that will take our viewer's eye from point A to point B. And they don't have to be physical lines, so they don't have to be man-made. They can be made out of shapes. They can be made out of light. They can be made out of color. They can be made out of movement. Your leading lines simply help guide your viewer's eye to the focal point. We also have to think about perspective. So if there are any macro photographers out there, you guys will know this very well, that even if you move over 2 inches to the right, or a centimeter down, or a millimeter up to the right, you've now drastically changed your image, right? You've drastically changed the composition. So in any genre of photography, that's still the case. You move over 2 inches to the right, 2 inches to the left, top, bottom, you have changed your perspective. So sometimes you have to lie on the ground to create the image you're trying to create. Sometimes you have to literally climb a mountain to create the image you're trying to create. It's about changing your perspective. And it's not just about changing your physical perspective, but it's also kind of about changing your metaphorical perspective, in a sense, about thinking about how to show your viewer a space that is commonly seen, how to show them that space differently, how to tell that story in a different way. So it's about changing your ideas of perspective as well. We also have to think about scale. So when we are in a location, or when we are photographing a specific flower, when we're photographing a specific animal, we know how big or how small that thing is. We were there, we were in that scene. So if we're all at the Grand Canyon together, we know how grand it actually is, but our viewer does not. They weren't there. So we have to make sure that we put something in that frame that helps them understand measurement a little bit better. So by putting people in your frame, or if you're photographing a flower, if a ladybug goes across it, they know how big a ladybug is, right? So it's going to help them understand the size of that flower, right? And scale, I think, is often the piece that gets forgotten in our photographs the most. We also want to think about creating shapes and looking for different movement within our frame to help guide our viewer's eye, just like leading lines, but through a shape, right? So making sure that things match up in a unique way. Things like in this image, her arm that goes right across the bottom of that car window, almost in the exact same shape, or her feet that are shaped the same as the tire, or the top of the balcony there that's horizontally aligned with the hood of the car, right? All of these shapes that help move our viewer's eye and connect all of these pieces that we're talking about. So while that is a lot of information and we covered a lot of topics, I might have gone over, but oh no, I didn't. I'm not great on time. Great. But this is your friendly reminder to please remember to enjoy the moment. Enjoy your photography. Enjoy actually the photographing process. Enjoy meeting people and trying new foods. Enjoy your travels. You are welcome to reach out to me. I'm going to give you my social media in just a second. But before I do that, I also want to mention that this is a program that I've been working on for the last couple of years, and it has finally come to fruition. This is the workshop series now put out by Tamron. We have 5 locations coming up. starting in September. 4 for 2021. So Hawaii, Iceland, Joshua Tree, and Monument Valley. Iceland, I actually believe, just sold out. So apologies for that. But then starting for 2022, we have Tanzania. So if you guys are all inspired and ready to start traveling again, and you would like to join us on a workshop, please feel free to do so. You are welcome to reach out to me with any questions that you have. You can find me on social media as Tamron Tech Erica on Facebook and Instagram. Please definitely connect with Looking Glass, get over to your store, try out some new gear, ask a whole bunch of questions. It's always, always great to physically have something in your hands. To try it gives you a whole different perspective than just seeing it online. And you get to try it for yourself. You know, I've had lots of people say, well, how do I know? You know, you kind of want to feel it out for yourself and have a good understanding of it. So anyway, that is me. I would love to bring back in Ben and Jen and see if there was any questions that I can help answer.
There's one straight away before we get off topic here. Somebody asking where to go. The link for the workshops. If we can, I'm guessing you probably have that readily available. If you could toss that in the chat room.
Yes. I have to unshare my screen for a minute though. So let's do this. If there's any other questions that I can help answer while I'm finding that, I can definitely try to do that too. See, we can kind of test my skills on whatchamacallit, on multitasking, which clearly I'm not doing so great at. Let's see. Okay. Here it is.
Well, we'll let you do that first, and then we won't overdo it.
It might get too hard to type, especially with the question I'm looking at.
Oh, okay.
Like, Erica, looks like Mark already beat you to it in the chat. So
all right.
Your efforts are appreciated, though.
Okay, good. Well, I'll put it up on the screen anyway, since I already found it, and we're still chatting. Let's see. Put it up here. Okay.
There you go. But yeah, very exciting for anybody interested. For those that haven't sold out, I mean, every one of those looks like an absolutely incredible opportunity, and of course, a great opportunity to not only get out and photograph the spaces, but to get your hands on some Tamron lenses and try some things out, so that you can come back and buy them from Looking Glass.
Yeah.
So a couple of the questions we had for you, Erica. The first one, I don't know if you're aware, I was not, that this Wednesday, being tomorrow, it must be, at 4 a.m. Along the West Coast, there's going to be a lunar eclipse. So somebody was asking for any tips, tricks, recommendations for photographing a lunar eclipse. Have you ever shot a lunar eclipse before?
I actually have not. Very honest, I have not. And I fully admit that for some reason the moon isn't something that I usually go chasing after. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but when I do, generally it is photographing the moon in particular, a couple different ways. So blue hour is a great time to do that, so that you can get all of those dynamic tones, because if you go out there too late, it's going to be incredibly dark, and then you are photographing just this bright white orb in the middle of a scene, right? A dark scene. So then everything is very contrasty. So the only kind of way to avoid that is by doing composite photos. So by metering properly for your moon or your bright object, and then metering other images for your actual landscape and scene, and then compositing those images together. That is quite likely a way to do it for a lunar eclipse, unless you are doing some sort of like silhouette, where I have definitely seen a lot of people do, they're metering specifically for the eclipse and that bright and dark kind of contrasting space, and doing a silhouette of like a climber in a mountain going through it. I've seen a lot of that. I personally haven't done it, so that is kind of all the advice that I have there. But I'm excited to see if I can try and find it.
Yeah, Yoni actually wanted to point out too, it's actually a lunar eclipse and a supermoon. combines on the same
Oh
day.
boy.
So it should be cool. It should be a good event.
Is
All
it
right.
enough to get you up out of bed, Erica? A combo?
I think it might have to.
Bloodman? And then there's a question that rather than try to type it all out, I thought we would just put it to you and let you answer. Denise was asking about, she's got the A7 IV. She's looking for a wide angle zoom, and she asked about I think she was kind of looking at the difference between the Sony wide angle and then the Tamron 17-28, and what the some of the perks or benefits are. Boy, I'm really leading this one. The perks or benefits of the Tamron lens compared
You can chat then. Please tell us. Go for it.
leading the witness. But go ahead.
So the 17-28 for Sony E-mount has quickly become one of the staples in my kit, specifically because of a lot of the night sky photography. So if I'm out photographing the Milky Way, or photographing a night scene, or I took it out on my friend's boat the other day because we were out at sunset, and you're in a small confined space, right? So I wanted something a little wider, but it was sunset, so lighter. I needed that 2.8. I needed to let in a whole lot of light. It's wildly sharp, and it's also a very small lens physically. So it's very easy to take around with me. Just having this little small kit, I can kind of like fit that anywhere I want in any backpack that I take with me. So I think that the 17-28 is a really great option for your Sony system. My kit, if I'm taking out my Sony, usually tends to be my 17-28, my 28-75, and then I'm, depending on the trip, I'm either taking my 70-180 telephoto or a prime, depending on the trip. So yeah, I think that's a great option.
I would second that, and I would say that it's actually the 17-28 I found really comes in handy for landscapes, but also just even in portraitures, as I photograph lots of people. It really comes in handy as being a wide angle option for that doesn't, there's not a whole lot of distortion, which typically is kind of a problem with wide angle lenses in people. But yeah, it just kind of is a great all around lens, but especially for that wide zoom, and currently is featured in the Tamron Trade Up program that you can find information on at Looking Glass Camera.
Sweet. You know what? I got a question sent to me, Erica, and so I want to make sure that we bring this up because I think this is actually a really, really important question. Yoni has asked, can you talk about shooting people when traveling? Do you ask permission or shoot first and ask later?
Great question, and always a big topic. So I always want to be the ethical photographer. I always want to be the person that treats someone, we talk about treating people the way we want to be treated, but I want to treat them better. I want them to know that I am not just somebody out there trying to take and create for myself, but that it is an experience. And if they are not okay with being photographed, that's okay. There are, what is it, like 85 billion people on the planet? I don't even know the exact number, but it's a ridiculous number, right? If that one single person does not want to be photographed, that's okay. We can move on. There are plenty of other people, places, and things to photograph. So I always go the route of being the ethical photographer. Now, if we're going to get technical as far as, public spaces versus private spaces and where we are allowed to photograph, you need to do your research beforehand on that specific country or city or even building. I grew up in Boston, and there's a church in Boston that you are legally not allowed to commercially photograph around. You can have your phone, you can take little pictures here and there, but if they catch you photographing for a professional shoot, you're going to get fined. You're going to get in big trouble for that, right? So not only do I always want to be the ethical photographer, but I always want to make sure that I'm just playing by the rules simply. Yes, you can do model release forms. So there is an app that you can get for your phone that I think costs like $10 that is like model release forms. So if you do meet someone, you photograph them, and you are planning on using them for commercial use or for print sales and things like that, then yes, you do want to make sure that you have a model release with you. That is very important. If you're, just taking images on the streets, and yes, you're in public spaces, so you can be photographing people, but someone approaches you and asks you not to be photographed, again, like I say, that is being the ethical photographer, and that's the route that I will always go. I want to make sure that I am creating a good experience for the people that I'm photographing, so that whenever they are approached in the future for another photograph, another photographer comes along and wants to photograph them, they are going to have had a good experience in the first place. So it's going to come full circle for other people as well. If I just randomly approach someone, jump in their face, photograph them, turn around and run away, I've now left a terrible taste in their mouth for the rest of the photo community, right? So there's different ways to go about it, of course, and there's different legal things that we have to approach. But I will always I will always take the route of being the ethical photographer. So thank you for the question, and thank you, Jen, for bringing it up, because I think it's super important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that really thoughtful answer. I mean, consent is important. That's it. We do have one other question, technical question. How do you make a quick decision to use a neutral density filter?
Oh, well, I guess it depends on how quick my decision has to be. So in that case, maybe having a variable neutral density is a little bit better if I'm in a scene where I know I am going to need that little bit of extra length in my shutter speed, but I'm not exactly sure how much. Maybe having a variable neutral density so that I can pick and choose along that way within that filter, have it go from 2 to 10 stops all in one. Maybe that's a quicker way to go about it versus having singular ones for every single stop. I personally, I have 2 neutral densities. I have a 6 stop and a 10 stop. And those are the 2 that I tend to take out the most. But like I said, it's a personal preference, and it really depends on how quick of a decision you have to make, and the type of traveling that you're doing. But having a variable and then maybe just leaving it on the 2 stops for starters will give you a little bit of wiggle room.
Fantastic. I think we may have got, unless Ben has other questions in his direct messages, and Erica, you might want to take a quick peek and see if you've got any. I want to point out that Yoni also did share in the chat that how to photograph a lunar eclipse from PhotoPills, a link to it. So if you're wanting to photograph that and you're looking for some good information, it looks like Yoni has provided us with a link that will get us that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody for being here. We always love getting together and talking photography and how we can change the world and do a good job and inspire others and ourselves. So again, phenomenal group. You guys, like, the chat has just been so beautiful this whole time. I can't even tell you how many conversations are going on in the background about things that you were talking about during the presentation.
That's awesome.
Especially like exchange rates. I think there were a lot of things about, money in other countries and how to deal with it. So maybe we'll include the chat when we send the follow-up email with the recording as well, because there's actually a lot of good info throughout it, because our community is awesome, and this is why we all come together. Not one of us doesn't have all the answers, but when we all get in here, hopefully we can answer all the questions.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm so glad you guys are here. I know that, yeah, the currency one is a little complicated. That's another one where there was like no direct perfect way to do so. I have found that in certain countries, taking out, I'll take out a little cash with me here so that I have a backup, but it'll actually save me money taking out money from an ATM there because the fees here are so expensive. So, but then again, that's a risk because you want to make sure that your card is going to work when you get there, right? Because if they don't accept your card, kind of screwed. So there are definitely different ways to go about it. Please do your research. All of this is simply opinion and my experiences, and I want to share. So I'm, again, glad to answer anything if you just want to reach out, for sure.
It's another good reminder though too, just in case your card doesn't work, make sure that you're being nice to all the people that you're photographing, because you're going to need the help of strangers.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And if you need a fixer or a guide for the location that you're going, you want to make sure that you treat them well. You want to make sure that you tip them. They are working really, really hard for you. They are navigating, they are figuring out timing, they're your translator, they're fixing your currency. That is your person. You want to treat them as well as you can. So maybe cash taking out extra before you go is important.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Any final thoughts before we exit today?
No,
That's always my favorite nobody has anything to say. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, just thank you. I definitely look forward to jumping into another class with you. So if you need me, let me know.
Erica, we love having you.
I stepped into your other classes recently. You had a class where Jamie and I jumped in to listen with Carol Guzzi and
Christy Odom and Tamara Lackey.
Girl, Jamie and I were like crying at the end of that.
Everybody was crying. I think we were all crying. Talk about a moment where we couldn't really like get words together afterwards. I was just like, I don't even know what to say now. Yeah, a lot of power in your presentations.
Was that the dog photography?
Yes, but it was so much more.
Yeah,
it's so much more. Yeah, for sure.
I was on that call too. It was brilliant. And I'd seen 2 of the photographers before, but I hadn't seen Carol's work, and that was so touching.
Wow. Yeah.
I've already told a few other people about that. If I have your permission to forward that webinar onto them, the link.
If we can raise more money for the sanctuary, yeah, it's only going to be available for 2 weeks. So
okay, and I've told people about the fundraising effort as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, best community. You're all amazing. All right, everybody, we are going to end this recording and end the presentation today. Ben and or Erica, if you guys want to hang on, we can chat afterwards. You're welcome to do so. Anyway, have a beautiful day, guys.
Lovely. Thanks for the inspiration.
Thanks, guys.
Happy photo.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.